And we're live. Everybody, welcome to the DCA show, where we try to take what's going on in this crazy world of crypto and break it down as best we can. And I think what I needed was a little bit of help because today's getting a little bit crazy. And it's been crazy for quite some time. So I've got over here on my left, well, you're right, maybe my left. This is Ben, Into The Cryptoverse. Thanks, Ben, for stopping by. I appreciate it. And then we've also got James from InvestAnswers stopping by. I appreciate it. And what we got, just as a reminder to check out these guys, there's a link in the description. And I've got both their channels right there. Watch James at InvestAnswers and Ben at Into The Cryptoverse. And today what we're going to try to do is just to bring things back because there's been so much talk. So we're going to talk about the craziness that is Putin and Ukraine. It seems like we can't escape it, but I think it's just a flex. Also, we're going to talk about this Canadian freeze and get back to reality. Also, we'll take a look at all the different reserve banks, the central banks that are just, seems like they're waging war against everyone and they continue to lose. And then lastly, we'll take a look at how Biden and regulation is coming forth. And I think there might be a way that America actually gets it right. So first things first, a lot of stuff to cover. So this is going to be a bit. So hold your questions till the end if you would, please. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get into it. First of all, let's do the first thing. We need some TA. This is TA time. So James or Ben, I'll have Ben take it. Well, I'm not going to kid anybody. Ben, take this first one. So TA time. What's the bottom and does that freak you out? And then James, after he gets done, I want to ask you the same question because does this freak you out what he's about to say? So Ben, if you want to share your screen, you got something, let me know. We can do it or you can just rip it away.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know what the bottom is. This is a question we've actually talked about for a number of months now. We said like, look, the problem in a downtrend is if you keep trying to predict the bottom, the market can continue to make a fool of you, you know? So I don't know where the bottom is, but we can talk about worst case scenarios, right? So like, could it be the bottom? I don't know. But this is the same thing, you know, I talked about back in the summer of 21, is that, look, Bitcoin does periodically go back down to its 200-week moving average, okay? This is not something that has to happen. It could have happened back in the summer and it didn't. Back in the summer, the 200-week was at 14K and we ended up going back up. Now it's at 20K. And, you know, this also corresponds to the prior all-time high. It also corresponds to our, you know, the regression band that we've talked about that is fit to say like the non-bubble data as well. So yeah, to me, that would be the worst case scenario. So, and when I say worst case scenario, what I mean by that is I try to think about a stable coin stack, right? So like if I have a stable coin stack, where would I want to put most of those chips in? And for me, I think, well, I have to layer in. So I've already been layering in. By the way, when we talk about bull markets and bear markets, I think a lot of people think that, oh, that means in a bear market, you have to sell everything. Typically when markets are bearish, I really start to scale back in from previously taking profits during a run up. I think about scaling in as we go down. So then if we do go to those levels, then I would be, you know, basically fully deployed at that point. Doesn't mean we can't go lower. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean we have to make it there. It just means that at that point, I would be fully deployed more or less back into the market because I would think that would be an area that we should be able to hold.
Yeah, gotcha. I watched your video about case of the bears, and it looked like you were talking about for the 200-week moving average around 20K. And that's and not to say everybody out there listening, it's not like it's going to 20K for certain, because guess what? Me, Ben, and James do not have a crystal ball. We have no idea.
Well, and also the 200-week moving average is moving up every single week. So, I mean, you know, the longer it takes us to, you know, I mean, for instance, in 2017, when we started down, we didn't actually get to the 200-week for a long time later. And I think when we started down, the 200-week was not even close to $3,100. But by the time we got to it, it had doubled. So for all we know, by the time we reach the 200-week, it could be a lot higher. So I don't know. I'm also going to put out another video calling a case for the bulls. So
I like that.
Just so I'm not, you know, just so I'm trying to provide an unbiased view.
Biased. All right. James, what do you got?
Yeah. So I just look at the development of the chain, the adoption, the scarcity on exchanges, and the fact that 80% of the game now is institutional. So it's not a retail game anymore. It's just the big money is aggregating. And when I look back at a post I made earlier this week about the SEC 13F filings, they have exploded. They're up 3x in this quarter alone, which means institutions, asset managers over 100 million bucks are buying Bitcoin, or they have an intent. They filed an intent to buy, or they're buying. So that's where we are. This is not a retail game. Retail's hurting. Retail's nervous. It's hard to believe. 24th of January, we're at 33K. Now they're freaking out at 40K. I don't know why it is. It just, I always say seatbelts, please. It's a volatile beast. Go long volatility for a maximum return. But everything, active addresses, adoption, supply and exchanges, everything on chain points to bullishness now. And answer to your question, where's the floor? I think worst case, if all hell broke loose in the world, you never know what could happen. It depends on how big the cascading capitulation is and knocking through floors and how much leverage is out there. But I'd say worst case would probably be 29K at this stage, which would take us back to where we hit during the summer. I don't see us going to 20K.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know people that would be selling organs at 20K to buy Bitcoin if that was the case. And it's always possible, though. One thing as well, you got to remember, I always say, have those crazy limit orders in place. Like I've got one that's sitting on my account now for over a month or 6 weeks, down at the 30,000 level in case we get one of those crazy wicks.
Yeah,
that can also happen. And just
That's true.
everybody's getting wise to that now. Like everybody was calling on the 24th or late January for a 20,000, 30,000 Bitcoin. You can see once we hit the 33K, all the big money started coming in, buying it. These were $1 million plus transactions. These weren't retail investors. People are accumulating and they're not retail. So what I urge anybody, and I'm on the receiving end of it a lot every time, is retail is saying, oh, I'm going to sell now, I'm going to buy back at 30K. Don't take that gamble. The odds of us going higher are much higher than the odds of us going lower. And the delta is also much higher if we go higher. So that's all I have to say.
Well, gotcha. So, I mean, that leads me to my next question, which is, does it freak you out? And this is for both you guys. Because like when I see these, for us, it's not a big deal, right? And we talked about this off camera. There's people right now, I think a lot of people watching these shows these days, they got it in 2021. And they got in like when it was, going pretty high. So this is probably like their first freak out. This is not our first rodeo. So it's like when people ask me like, why are you so calm? It's because we've already done this like, I don't know, 20 times before. So right now, does this freak you out for the things that are going on? Just real quick, Ben, what do you got?
No, I mean, honestly, these times are easier in the market. Oftentimes, I think it's a lot harder when things are going parabolic, because then you have to have the conviction to actually take profits on something you believe is the future. So it's hard to sell.
Yeah.
During these times, it's actually relatively easy for me in the sense that, look, I have a position in Bitcoin and I'm continuing to DCA into the market, even if I think there's a good chance it could go down, because at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen. We could be at 60K in 2 months, or we could be at 20K in 2 months. And either way, there's going to be people there to say they told you so, right? So the way I look at it is, I say, I have Bitcoin. Like I do think people should focus, on really the blue chips, right? Like this is not the time to be going to really be betting, I think, on micro cap garbage, right? Like the blue chips, I think, is where you should be focused. But look, I just have the buy orders set, and I have them set all the way down. So, if the bottom, I already had an order filled at 35K when we went down there a few weeks ago. If we go down further than that, I have buy orders set. If we don't, then, I'm happy to just see things go back up again. So do I really care? No, because I think we're in the stage, the long, boring stage of just, you come up with a strategy, you stick to it, and then you just wait. And eventually we'll go back up again, whether it's from here, whether we have to go down first and then go up, I don't know. But it doesn't really bother me, because we've seen these types of FUD storms before. And, Bitcoin is resilient, right? It does trend up with time. So if history is an indication, I will keep assuming that it will generally increase with time, and that it goes through periods of undervaluation and overvaluation.
Gotcha. And then, you know what, I will say thanks to you guys, because that was one of the questions you asked a couple of weeks ago about those limit orders. And I was like, no, I don't have anything. And I was like, I probably should do that. So I've got these crazy low orders just sitting around. So hopefully they get filled. I think
you can also get like scam wicks too on some exchanges where like it doesn't go there on any other exchange, but then there's like a couple exchanges where it goes so much further down. So yeah.
Gotcha. James, I know you don't care. I know you're like, I don't care about this because you've been here for a long time. So.
Well, just put things in perspective, looking at some orders, like 460 days ago, I was buying Bitcoin at 10,000 as much as I possibly could. And it's done a 4x in that window of time. 460 days ago is not that long ago, everybody. And this is just the thing. And I bought yesterday at 40,000 and change. So, it's just, it's just the most, and I don't want to sound like I'm slinging hopium here, but it's the most asymmetric bet we've seen in our lives. Yes, there's always that 1% chance it could go to zero, but there's a 99% chance it's going to go way higher. And I just, last year I was flabbergasted with the adoption and the developments and the El Salvador news and everything else. This year, I just finished a video and I looked at 8 price prediction models. And the average of those 8, these come from people like Fidelity and ARK Invest and Metcalfe's Law, etc. The average of all of those models is $4.6 million by 2030. Just the average. The high end is 12.5 million. So just taking that, worst case scenario, my worst case scenario, let's not think about could we go to 20,000 or could we go to 28,000? That's not the big picture. The question is, where is the destination? And the destination, my worst case scenario right now per my model is about $750,000, which in less than 8 years, that's a pretty good return. That's a CAGR of what, 45%. So where else you're going to get 45% compound annual growth rate for the next 8 years. And that's my bear case. So that's what people need to wrap their heads around. Not, oh my God, I bought Bitcoin at 50,000. Now it's at 40. It's like, yeah, just, layer in dollar cost average as much as you can. The name of this show.
That is it. That is the hardest point. So right now, if you're just sitting back like, man, I don't know how this works. This is how it works. It's just time. Time under pressure makes diamonds. And that's how it works out. So getting into what James was talking about, yes, it's not the greatest day. Yes, we are down. But just like both these gentlemen said, look, Bitcoin was down at what, 32,000? How long ago?
24th of January.
Exactly. And then, of course, the S&P 500 takes a hit, NASDAQ takes a hit, and that's exactly what's going on. And I think it just comes down to there's just a lot of people out there that are afraid. And one of these things they're afraid of is this. So the Ukraine thing, there's a new story out. Putin to oversee nuclear drills during standoff over Ukraine. This is just one of those things. I just want to talk about it real quick. If this happens or it doesn't happen, the big thing is, what does this all mean for in the future, 3, 4, 5 years? Will we even remember some of these things? Will these things be like the end all be all, or will it be just a blip? Ben, what do you think?
I think a lot of these things will just be blips, and a lot of things are overblown, like sensationalized.
Yeah.
As far as what's going on in sort of geopolitical stuff, I'm not an expert at that stuff, and I know people a lot of it's just a mind game, right? Of kind of showing force. Are they going to do something? Are they not? I don't know. I don't really think anyone knows, but there is a good chance it's being blown out of proportion. I try to think to myself, well, if it is being blown out of proportion and nothing really comes of it, and markets can get back to normal, then we could easily look at this in 5 years and not even remember it, right? Not even remember what exactly the FUD was to take Bitcoin back down to, the 33K region, which we went to a few weeks ago. We've seen these types of things before, right? It was also in 2014 in Crimea. And every few years, North Korea pops up on the news for a while because of stuff they're doing. And it always has a habit of going away a few months later when we realize nothing's going to really come of it. So people, it's funny because a lot of people on YouTube, the clickbait, right? The clickbait thumbnails, other media is the same way, right? You just want to talk about sensationalist stuff as much as possible because that's what gets the most views, and what gets the most views attract the more ad dollars, the more money from advertisers. So it's all a game to just get money, I think. But with that said, I mean, with that said, I do think it's worth at least taking seriously and realizing that, look, if something does happen over there, and you also have the stock market trending down, like we could remember this as as some type of deleveraging event as well, and a risk off environment for for more than a few months if things really get bad. But like, I think it's anyone's guess, and I'm not an expert on geopolitical things. There are a lot of people on Twitter though that seem to be experts on it recently, so I'll defer to them.
They're the same people that will they're the armchair quarterbacks. Like, oh, I can't believe you didn't throw that way. I threw it this way. I would, if I was there. You were not in the Super Bowl, so whatever. All right, James, what do you think?
Well, I think back 5 or 10 years ago, people were forecasting cyber wars. I think we've bypassed cyber wars altogether. It's now we're in the realm of what we call disinformation wars. And it started with Putin messing with global elections, like the US election, everything else. He is like Elon Musk. He loves to troll. He loves to mess with people. I don't know if you want to call it a social Kardashian type thing that he's doing right now. But I think that's where we're going. This is a war of disruption. This is a war of disinformation. Mini cyber war, psychological war, economic war. He wants to disrupt. He wants to disrupt the US dollar. He wants to disrupt global economy. He wants people to think, hey, I'm the man. And also what people don't actually really estimate is people think Putin may not be loved in his home country. They think he is the man. They think he is an absolute god. So from that perspective, we're just in that weird place. And he's just playing a disinformation war. The saber rattling is kind of off the charts, in, off, on, off. And then the response from the president of the Ukraine was really interesting. Like, he was joking. Oh yeah, I know the exact day they're going to invade. And 2 hours later, his admin says, oh, he was just messing with the world. It's just very, very bizarre time. So right now I've discounted everything, and I'm in touch with 2 people on the ground in Kiev. In the Ukraine, they say nothing's going to happen. But then I heard from somebody else closer to the border saying they're packing up their stuff and leaving. So I don't know what's up, but I'm now at this stage, I'm 65%, 70% sure it's going to be a nothing burger. But you never know.
There's always a play behind the play. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And then, like what you just said about, people that are actually in the country, there's a little bit different view than what the mainstream media really projects. It's the same thing when I talk about the digital yuan. There's people who are from China or they have family in China. They're like, yeah, the Chinese government, of course, is going to say how great it is. But I can tell you right now that even though they push it, no one really wants to use it. We have these super apps, whatever it's called, WeChat. We use a lot of that. And it goes, whatever they say, it's to their own agenda. So just be aware that these mainstream media is a little bit fake. And just what Ben was talking about, hey, sensationalism rules the day. Speaking of which, let's take just a real quick, because we are not experts in this one, but I feel like there's an opportunity here. This was Canadian police freeze crypto wallets tied to the Freedom Convoy protest about to take back Ottawa in entirety. I will let you read this. I linked in the description, but I want to make a distinction here first is I want to make sure that everybody knows that it's not about the protest and what it's about. What I'm talking about here is just the freezing of the wallets. And I want to just make sure that there's the myth versus the reality. And as far as I understand it, they're talking about freezing the exchanges and not the individual, like a MetaMask wallet or your Ledger or your Trezor or something like that. And I think when people hear this, they get concerned because like, oh, the government's going to freeze everything and take it all down. I think there's an opportunity for education. James, am I right in this one? And what do you think?
Yeah. So what the headline was very wrong. What they are doing is tracking wallets. There, I think, as far as I know, from the Freedom Convoy, there's about 11 wallets. One is Cardano, one is
Cardano.
There's about six Bitcoin ones. It's mostly Bitcoin, and 90% of the money is Bitcoin. Yeah. But what they're doing is tracking the addresses. So if the convoy tries to go to a fiat on-ramp through an exchange, that will kick up a red flag for the government. They haven't frozen the wallets per se, unless, of course, those wallets are in custody of another entity. Then that's theoretically feasible. But no, it's a little bit overblown. Again, if you have your wallet and your seed phrase, you're safe. Keep it off the exchange. And never before has it become more important. Not your keys, not your coins. Things like this bring that all to the fore.
Gotcha. So Ben, I'm not going to ask because geopolitical, who cares, right? I mean, it's a big thing, but I will ask you this question. For you, for cold storage. How much of your crypto do you have in cold storage versus on the exchanges? Because you got to have some to fill those orders and stuff like that.
It's a good question. I don't know exactly what the percentage is. I do have a majority of it in cold storage. I don't keep a ton on exchanges, but I do have some like in other places, like besides say like centralized exchanges. I have some in like liquidity pools on decentralized exchanges as well. So I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a majority. I want to say it's probably around like 70% or something like that. But I don't actually know the number. And also a lot of it depends on the price of the cryptocurrencies at a given time, depending on what the percentage is. Yeah, I mean, you know, when we hear about things going back to what you guys were just talking about with Canada, I always think back to the idea of like, first they ignore it, right? Then they laugh at it, then they fight it, then you win, So like they are currently trying to fight it. But I also think that them trying to fight it just makes the case for, Bitcoin and decentralized finance. It just makes it even stronger. I don't see cryptocurrency like losing its foothold in any way. I think that we go through these boom and bust cycles. And I mean, as cliche as it is, right? Whatever doesn't kill it's going to make it stronger. And I do think it will come back stronger and stronger every time. Like we already have one country, El Salvador, that's buying Bitcoin. It's only a matter of time before we have more. You already have Putin talking about like the advantages of mining for Bitcoin. Next week, we're going to have, we'll see what Biden says about it. Maybe it'll be good news, maybe it'll be good news. And then it'll take everyone by surprise. And we'll just go full bull mode again. I don't know.
I agree. I think it'll be good news. And that actually leads me to my next point. Because just like what you talked about, first they laugh at you, first they fight, and you win. Gandhi quote. I think I missed one in there. But this just comes down to the next question I have. And it's all about these central banks. And these central banks, like you see this one, this is for the Central Bank of India. Ravi Shankar, Deputy Governor for Indian Central Bank, says we should ban crypto. Pakistani Central Bank Governor, we should ban crypto. And then, of course, we had the big debacle with Russia, where the Central Bank of Russia said we should ban crypto. And the finance minister goes, no, we're going to regulate it. And then Putin's like, you know what? Not only that, but we got a really strong case for mining it. So to grab some bench because we're going to do what I want to do. So the question then is, it seems like all these central banks are pretty much united in what they're talking about. So who wins? Central banks versus the government versus the people? Do you think that this is going to be a long, drawn-out thing? Or do you think we can actually, pull this out as far as the retail investors, institutions? James, I'm going to start with you.
Well, central banks can't sleep at night. They are very, very concerned about the disruption from stable coins and Bitcoin and everything else. Traditional banks are fed by central banks, and the traditional banks are bleeding assets and deposits. If you go to the UK, for example, half the banks there won't even give you a fiat on-ramp to a cryptocurrency exchange. So this is very real, and they have to fight it with FUD. It's all they got. But the world is changing so fast. These central banks and governments, they just can't keep up. So now they resort to fighting you, like the IMF in El Salvador, classic example. So it's and the FUD they use has just been blasted to pieces so many times, like the Bitfinex couple that did every trick in the book to try launder and try cover up their steps, and they were still found by the FBI. And then the FBI yesterday announced they're launching a new division to do this type of stuff. So the FUD narrative, the ESG narrative, it's all just falling apart right now. But the world is going to be facing a huge amount of change, and nothing is going to be able to hang together over the coming years. There's far too much global debt. The central banks have far too much debt. They can't stop money printing because they need to service the debt. They can't increase interest rates because then they can't afford to service the debt. It's just, we are facing a massive reset. So it's super interesting to watch, and also a little bit terrifying for those that aren't prepared with hard assets.
No, I agree. Ben, what do you got on this one? Because I mean, the way that I see it, I just see like it's like an exercise in futility. You're just kind of like pushing against the dam that's eventually will break. But I mean, I could be wrong here. Do you think this will actually lead us to like a longer type of adoption, just because these central banks are like, we don't want this to happen and we'll control the narrative?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that we're on the path to global adoption. It's happening, I think, regardless. I mean, the narratives change constantly with this stuff. Like, and I think a lot of times it varies depending on the general mood.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a central bank, but I remember back in 2017. Do you remember when like Goldman Sachs said they were going to like open a crypto trading desk, and then the bear market started, and then they and then they were flooding Bitcoin, like and saying that going to zero, like literally like a few weeks after saying they were opening a trading desk for it or something. So I think that I think that it's just I think that we will prevail. I mean, I do think that regulations and regulation fears can certainly cause, I mean, it can certainly help rationalize downturns in the market or bear markets. But I mean, the same stuff has been there every cycle. So, I mean, I think we'll continue to get through it. And if anything, once we get through the regulation issues, it should be a good thing for the industry if they can get it right. If they can get it right, I should say.
Yeah, that is a big if. That is a big if. But I mean, I've always said, like, I think we need regulation, and people will say, no, we don't. What we do to get, like, just like what James was talking about, the institutions are here, but they want a little bit of guidance, and we can put it forth. But the problem is that I think they're going to mess up. They're going to overregulate. But it does lead me to my next point, with what James was talking about, as far as like the central banks and the retail banks or the smaller banks, they are actually bleeding out. And I think it's leading to things like this, where Binance joins the Russian banking union and will head up a new crypto department. So this just came out not too long ago. But the whole thing is for them to start to provide a dialogue with federal authorities, legislators, experts in the field, and so on and so forth. Binance's Eastern European director, Gleb Kostrup, nailed it. I think this is what concerns me about America not being as fast as it would. He said our goal is to obtain a license and conduct legal businesses where the regulation allows. I think that's the problem right now, because America is not, they're kind of dragging their feet. So am I wrong on this one, or is America just getting passed by? Ben, since you're up, I'll let you. Oh, you're muted, Ben.
Sorry, what was that? I didn't catch the last word you said.
Oh yeah, so for these different regulations that are coming down. I mean, Binance is already saying, look, we're going to work with the Russian banks, and it seems like there's these crypto projects that are like, well, we're getting screwed over here, so we're going to take off. Do you think that's a big hindrance? Do you think people will stick around in America? Or I think I
didn't hear the last question. Yeah, I think I think people will leave. I mean, look, you can't expect them to stick around forever, right? I mean, you have to allow people to innovate, and I think there's already a lot of people who have left to innovate elsewhere. And if you don't give people the right environment to innovate and the right regulations to do so, then what choice do they have than to go somewhere else? I mean, this is an up and coming asset class. And I think a lot of people recognize that. And really, the times like right now are the times to be building anyways, right? You build when the market is bearish so that you can really enjoy it when the market is bullish. So I do think people will leave. And I mean, I think we've already seen that across. I mean, I think a lot of people have already left. And I mean, like, people can't just wait around forever for the United States to come around. By the time they do come around, I think we will have lost a decent amount of talent that we could have had innovating in crypto in the United States.
Yeah. So for everybody in EU, Australia, Canada, South America, congratulations. We're dragging our feet. James, same thing.
Yeah, well, the Spot ETF is a classic case in point of how the US regulators are dragging their feet, and people are voting with their feet as well. So you see it on a micro scale of people leaving high state areas like New York and California, moving to tax-free states like Nevada and Florida, etc., Texas. And you're seeing that now on a bigger scale. You got people going to tax-free jurisdictions like El Salvador, Portugal, Puerto Rico, etc. So everybody's beginning to vote with their feet. And I don't think the states or the country has realized the damage. And I remember, I think it was Kathy Wood said a couple of months ago, so this is ridiculous. We're now being forced to buy an ETF in Canada. We've got to deal with the FX risk and exposure on top of everything else. So it's just a strange world. So yes, definitely dragging their feet. I've become more and more dismayed with politicians all around the world. Actually, they're all, as far as I'm concerned, I don't even know how they got into office. But there needs to be another reset in that part of the world too. I don't know why these people are even paid or why they're in office at all. The decisions that are made that cover all gamuts, not just financial services, in this day and age are just inexcusable, and they're damaging everybody. So
Yeah.
I don't want to get political.
There will be a nice reset. I mean, I think the average age for a U.S. congressman, I think it's between 68 and 72 years old or something like that. I don't know if
they're in their 80s. Yeah. And they don't even know, like when you see the line of questioning around things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, they are so out of their depth. It's just embarrassing. Like a 4-year-old would be able to propose better questions.
And this, well, I'm going to fast track this next one because the question was, is America getting it right on crypto? I think there's some points, but I got 2 questions for you then. And I'm just going to bypass some stuff. First of all, Biden's proposal, not the proposal. What he's talking about is bringing forth like, hey, I want you guys to actually talk about this and get together, the CFTC, the SEC, the Treasury, the State Justice and Homeland Security. And I want you guys to put together some type of framework for us to regulate crypto. And that's just the start. There's like nothing really that is concrete. He was like, just put together a committee, everybody works together, and we'll see what we can do. Give it to me in 4 weeks or something like that. And then I will say there is one thing that I do agree with, and this is going to be a little controversial, I think, but I do agree with the SEC on one point. And this was from, I linked this in the description. It's from CipherTrace. And it was all about proving about illicit activity, but that's not the point. The point for this one is they talk about how DeFi rug pulls are the top exit scam as far as like the illicit activity, I guess you'd call it, in crypto. They said these are the ones that, big exit scams in 2020. But there was one thing they said, and it stuck with me. And it said this: the US SEC has noticed DeFi projects that have been subject to vulnerabilities, hacks, attacks, fraud, and manipulation. At their summits, the SEC czar, Valerie Stepanek, nailed it, said, when you are running DeFi things on code and you're putting out in the wild, you're missing a step where you may want to test the code, you want to audit the code, have the peer review, send it out live right away without those protections is risky. And I thought about it, I go, that is one of those things that a lot of these, not a lot, but some of these products actually do. And I thought to myself, that's not a bad thing to actually make them audit it, because right now you don't have to. And then it rolls out and people get rug pulled. So I'm thinking, so there's 2 questions. First of all, Joe Biden and this group, this coalition he's trying to put together, is this actually the right step to do, or is it just too slow and just $1 too late? And the second thing is what the SEC just talked about as far as like getting people, as far as like these DeFi products, to say, hey, you need to audit this first before it comes out. Is that a good idea, or is that just off the rails? And I'll start with James because he's up there on the top. You're muted again. Sorry. Let me unmute you.
The regulation is definitely needed in the space, but they can't be too constricting. But if there is some regulation to prevent people from getting hurt, people losing their money, all the scams, like the 17,000 tokens that are out there, come on. It's pretty obvious that 80% of them are complete scams and maybe 95% of them. So that's a big issue, and that needs to be cleaned up and fixed. And then also, if there is some regulatory framework inside that will protect institutions as well, that'll bring a lot more money to the space. So that'll all be good. It's just the problem is the people making these decisions don't have a clue. We saw that with the Build Back Better that they tried to insert. They just don't understand the space. They do have some people that are ramping up fast. I was very impressed with Ted Cruz. He was a quick study, and a couple of other senators out there too. And this is going to drive the future for this country. And I think there are states now that are just embracing Bitcoin hand over fist as quick as they can, like Texas, where you're from, Rob. And the new breed of politicians will be the future. And if you go against this new crypto world, you are black marking yourself for life. So your political career is over. So I think politicians are getting very clever to this. It's kind of embrace it or die is the way I see it.
Yeah. Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, I've also seen a lot of politicians like pretend to embrace it, you know, and like they'll even like reach out, I think, to influencers and try to get, you know, how can they appeal to the crypto vote. So do be careful, because just because someone says Bitcoin doesn't mean they understand it at all.
No, this is true.
Yeah, but
Anything
I
for
mean,
a vote.
I think I agree with what James said. You know, one of the reasons I don't really talk about DeFi that much on my channel is just because I don't want to accidentally promote something that it's going to get rug pulled, you know, and it's so easy. I think one of the things when using DeFi products is to go with the ones that have at least been battle tested for a while, not the ones that are just popping up every single day with like unsustainable rates that just don't really make a whole lot of sense. Those are incredibly risky, and I would stay away from those. I would prefer to earn much lower interest and have the security of at least, you know, the security of actually keeping my crypto and not being rugged one day. And I've even seen some, you know, some people who have large audiences, they openly have rug pulled their audience and they don't care, you know. So like, it's one of those things where it's like, do I say, you know, it's like, okay, you want decentralization, right? How do you protect people against themselves? I don't know. I don't know exactly the right solution there. I think for me, the way I navigate this stuff is I don't think that I need anything, you know, mandated by the government for me to understand the risks involved. I would like to think that would apply to everyone else as well, but I mean, I think the best thing you can do is just try to understand the risks and actually a lot of these projects do get audited. Like they sell, or they hire people to come audit them. And a lot of this stuff, I mean, a lot of the DeFi projects, I don't know if you guys have explored any of them, but I have spent some time doing it. And if you just diff, like if you diff the code from one to another, a lot of times the code is like the exact same thing. They just change the native token. It's the exact same stuff. And it's just, you go farm it for a couple months, you dump the native token, you move on to the next one. There's a whole bunch of people that do this, and you rinse and repeat over and over again. So I would say be careful. And also one of the things that the diff tool can do, which I know I'm getting on a tangent here, is that it can help highlight vulnerabilities. Like if you see some section of code that is very different from what you're used to seeing, that's often where I would focus in on.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it's the same thing with NFTs. We see the same, I mean, the same types of scams come over and over again. I get 30 emails a day about, hey, promote this and promote that. I mean, there's very rarely do I do anything, because just like what Ben talked about, I think it's a scary world. And then last thing, and then we'll get to the Q&A. I just wanted to share this to everybody. I know that we talked about, you know, the central banks, but at least one of the central banks, Fed Reserve, came out and said, hey, we don't have any plans to ban Bitcoin and crypto. I think that's actually good news. This was a while ago. This is September 30th. But just remember this, like what Ben talked about, if Biden's plan comes out and he says, hey, we're really, you know, it's very positive on how they want to put things together, expect the market to do pretty well. And I don't care how you dice and slice that. I think it'll be pretty good for everybody. But the question is, what's it going to be as it comes out? And that's all I got. So let's get into the Q&A. Man, we did that pretty good. 38 minutes, not too shabby. All right. So questions. This is a good one. ER says, hey guys, at this point, if you have money on the side, at what price would each of you buy more Bitcoin today? James?
Yeah, I have a kind of a stepladder approach. I think the same thing that Ben has. So the lower it goes, the more I buy, sometimes by a factor of 3 each step down. So I did buy yesterday at about 40,500, a little taste. I also bought a few of the little things, but just nibbling. I'm in a pretty big cash position. So I'm waiting for that capitulation event. I just don't know when it's going to occur. But in the meantime, I'm nibbling as a good anchor. Sometimes the markets can reverse pretty quickly, and I don't want to miss these cheap prices, but I'm not going all in by no stretch. So for example, for me, it's 40K, 38K, 36.1, etc., all the way down for Bitcoin and a couple of other names too.
Huh. So tell me that again. That was interesting. So like as it goes down by 10, by how much?
Like say for example, you put $10,000 in at 40,000.
Sure.
I put $30,000 in at 38,000, etc. 100 grand in at 36,000. It just goes up exponentially. but also look at other opportunities too as well. And I'm get into a lot of option positions, and they require a lot of margin too. So I'll just it depends how low certain things go. Like for example,
Gotcha.
Avalanche at 65 looks tasty. Things like that. So,
yeah, no, it does. It does. A lot of that's what's great about right now. Everything looks pretty good, but the question is, will it keep going down? And even if it does go down, who cares? You just keep buying. Not who cares, but as it goes down, that's a pretty good strategy. You can 2x, 3x, add 15, 20% on your position, whatever else. Ben, the same question for you. What's the price?
I do the same thing. I refer to it as dynamic DCA, so that like
that's it.
You don't want to weight the buys equally, because you want to get your cost basis down as low as possible. So you want to weight the lower buys more. So I'm just looking at mine. So I had my most recent buy based on like where I just set buys. I still sometimes I still will occasionally just DCA into the market no matter what the price is. But the actual larger buys that I have set, the last one that was filled was at like just below 35K at 34,679. And then the ones below that, I have another one at like 30K or 32K, 29, 27. And I mean, I have them laddered all the way down. And each one is more or less marginally more than the one before it, in terms of how much it's weighted. So I'm kind of waiting for a little bit more clarity in this market. And I don't really want to, and I think a lot of us are kind of fall into this camp at this point. Like, we're not trying to chase clout, trying to predict exactly what's going to happen, because we don't really know. But I think what I'm waiting for really is I want to see one of two things, right? I want to either see a major capitulation by Bitcoin with a lot of volume, right? Where you actually see a deleveraging event similar to March of 2020, December of 2018. Or there's plenty of, there's been plenty of, there was also May 2021. We had a pretty big deleveraging event where we dropped like 55% in a really short period of time. So I'm either looking for that to occur, or for Bitcoin to get back above these shorter term moving averages, like the 20-week SMA, the 21-week EMA, and hold it as support. I don't really know what's going to come first, but whatever does is where I would really start to get more aggressive on buying. So like if let's say if Bitcoin capitulates, then it's easy, because then I just go ahead and buy and I just wait. If it doesn't, and we go back above these, I call it the bull market support band, right? So if we get back above that and hold it as support, then I would actually start to get more aggressive without waiting for the lower prices, because then I would probably just start thinking we're not going to go to those prices. So I have them layered, I have them laddered down, more or less all the way to the 200-week SMA. And we'll see which ones get filled and which ones don't.
That's solid. I like that. I actually had, just listen to that, I'm like, man, I need to put some more limit orders in. That's for damn sure. All right. So there's this one, super chat. So if the FBI can go after criminals and recover money that they have stolen on the blockchain, what would keep them from coming after anyone else? And I'll just take this real quick. If you're in China or something like that, or in different countries that would really, hammer down, they can do that without unilateral support. But in countries that are supposed to be democratic, that's not how it's supposed to go. Now, people will just say, Rob, you're naive. They can do whatever they want to. But so far, we haven't seen that. And that's all I'll say about that. Anybody want to add anything to that, what I just talked about?
Yeah, well, one of the concerns that goes way beyond just the FBI and crypto, but central bank digital currencies will become true spy coins that will be ultimately confiscatable at any time, anywhere. Like, if I talked about this a few days ago, if Canada had a central bank digital currency, they could turn off all those truckers in a flash. Literally, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves, afford gas, or anything else. And that's the way the world is going. And I think that's going to fuel a lot of demand for self-sovereignty in cryptocurrencies as we go forward, because nobody wants that type of exposure.
Yeah, but here's a question, then I'll follow up. So if you know that's going to happen, and this is the same thing we talk about on the channel, is that there's some people who are super educated. They're like, I'm not going to keep everything on the exchange. I'm going to have it in the cold storage. I just think at that one point when people, that actually does start happening, if it does, I'm not saying it's going to, that people will say, oh, here's where the education part comes in. This is what you really should be doing. You should probably take that off into cold storage and things like that. It's the same thing as like people getting rug pulled. There's no greater teacher than being screwed over or making huge mistakes. That's what happened to me in 2017. I was like, man, I went at the very top. I should have DCA'd, really screwed that up. But I got to tell you, it was a great lesson. And now here we are.
Well, Mark Cuban has been rug pulled a couple of times. He hasn't learned his lesson yet. So
why you got to do that, James? Why do you got to call that guy out? But hey, you know what? He did beat the SEC in the lawsuit in 2013. Just saying. Ben, what do you got for this one?
I was just going to say, no, you're right. I mean, the people that have been around the market the longest, they always tend to be the more cautious ones and say, yeah, like these lower prices could happen. And the only reason we say it is because we've seen that type of thing happen before, right? It's not that we want to see it. It's just that we've seen that type of price behavior in the past. And so we want to make sure that people in crypto today also understand that while it doesn't have to happen, it could happen. And as you said it the best, like getting screwed over is probably the best teacher of all. Cause I got completely wrecked in 2013, like completely. I mean, and it dropped 90%. Like, I mean, Bitcoin dropped 90% back then. And I thought it was dead. And by the way, in 2014 and 2015, there was this no market cycle theory stuff. Like I didn't really know what was going to happen. I remember Ethereum it was like $7 and it went to 14, then back to 7. And I was like, all right, this is going to go back to 0. So yeah, being screwed over is definitely, I think, the best way to learn in these markets.
Yeah, I don't know who, one of you guys said it. I forgot who it was, but you said that sometimes you just, that first bull run isn't your bull run, but it's always the next one where you make all your money. I don't know which one of you said it. One of you said it. But this leads me to my next question. It's just comments, but it's a question. Spot ETF ain't coming this year. Hope we get a Bitcoin spot ETF this year. What's your predictions? I know me and James totally do not agree on this one. So James, what do you think? Have you changed your opinion about Bitcoin spot ETF?
Yeah, so I projected last year. I thought June 2022 would be the time for a Bitcoin spot ETF to happen, and then it would be followed by 2 or 3 others per Gary Gensler. But the letter that he issued the other day to Mr. Emmett or Emmers, gave me a little bit of concern. So I think it might be iced for now. But the political pressure, you got to remember, half of the politicians get paid by Wall Street. Wall Street wants it fast, and they're finding other ways to on-ramp it. So if it doesn't, like you just look at MicroStrategy stock, it's 16% owned by BlackRock because they don't have a spot ETF, so they buy MicroStrategy. So people figure it out. It would really, if it did happen this summer, talk about rocket boosters for Bitcoin price, because it would help. It would just be an easy on-ramp for so many big institutions, etc. But there are other ways. There's ETFs all over the world: Brazil, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, so Sweden. They'll find other ways to get access. But I think it is sad for the US to fall behind like that. And I think Gary Gensler will come around.
Yeah, I don't think it's sad for the US. The US gets what it reaps what it sows. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. Ben, what do you think? Is there any chance? You've been around the longest, so you would.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I've been hearing about spot ETFs forever, and I even back in 2017, we thought they were kind of just around the corner. I mean, you were back. I know you were, in the markets back then too. So I understand like the caution, because it's like, we've heard this before, right? Same thing as like ETH 2.0. Oh, it's 2022 and it's still not here, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the earliest it could happen would be later on in 2022. But I was reading some of the concerns they were putting forth, and a lot, some of it was about Tether and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's going to be resolved by this summer. So, I mean, it probably won't. So I mean, I do lean towards not thinking it's going to happen this summer. I mean, probably the grayscale one would be the best bet if it's going to happen. By the way, that's an interesting play, because if it happens, I really do wonder how that premium is going to play out if it gets converted to a spot ETF. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably better to err on the side of caution and assume it's not going to happen. But whenever it does happen, especially if it comes after, say, like some type of a bear market, that could be a catalyst to start a new bull.
Yeah, I mean,
if you see a lot of volume going into GBTC, real lot of volume, real fast, it means Wall Street knows, and they're buying it up, and the discount will go to zero real fast.
It'll be arbitraged away immediately.
Exactly. So
see, that is what drives me insane, right? Like, we all know it's there. We all know we're on that precipice of what's could potentially happen, but the price does not reflect it. We get great news, then we get some stupid stories out there, then it's kind of just tanks the whole thing. I'm like, what the? we really should be, but I mean, Ben talked about a fair market value and 200-week moving average was around 20K. So I'm like, well, it is what it is. Which actually, so what Ben just talked about, ETH 2.0, here's another question. Hey, James, Rob, Ben, two largest bags are ETH and Matic. You guys think it's a good position? James.
Well, they complement each other very well because I see Matic as being a very, very important lifesaver for ETH and the network and the two different layers I always talk about. So I think it's tricky to say. I'm losing a lot of faith with Ethereum, and it is my second biggest crypto bag myself. I was very concerned with the delays and ETH2 being rebranded to something else, and the complete dependency now on ZK rollups, the layer 2s, and all that stuff. So we're digging into that. I think I just look at some of the other chains that are already ETH 2.0, and they're operating.
Yeah.
They might be in beta versions, but what Ethereum has is it's going deflationary, huge amount is tied up, and of course it is the incumbent. It's very hard to take that player off the horse, but the other chains are eating away fast. So that's like, I think the total amount of TVL in Ethereum a year ago was 97.5%. Today it's about 66%. That's just within a year, and that's staggering.
Dude,
staggering change.
I'm telling you, MySpace and Facebook. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think ETH and Matic are good projects. My personal conviction though is that Bitcoin should be the largest, sure. Especially if you look at, say, like your risk-adjusted returns and you calculate those out. Bitcoin, I think, should be higher. In fact, if you're curious, your Sharpe ratio is for just Bitcoin and ETH is maximized with a portfolio of approximately 65% Bitcoin, 35% ETH, meaning that like you don't necessarily get the best returns with that portfolio, but you get the best risk-adjusted returns with that portfolio. So I would argue Bitcoin should be number one, but I'm pretty risk averse, so I can understand why people might want to have Bitcoin further down. But as far as the actual projects, I do think ETH and Matic are good. And also one of the things that you look at when you hold an altcoin besides, say, like Ethereum, is you want to know, like, does it bleed against Ethereum? Because if it does, you're just taking on more risk for less reward. Unfortunately, Matic ETH's valuation does not show that it has been bleeding. I mean, it's actually been fairly constant for the last year, which is a lot better than a lot of other altcoins. So I think from a technical perspective and from a fundamental perspective, with roll-ups and layer 2 solutions, I think that Matic makes sense. And I also think, obviously, I think ETH makes a lot of sense too.
I like ETH for the short term. Let's see what the developers do. But that ETH 2.0, I've been hearing about that for the longest time as well. Just like that Bitcoin ETF, I still have no faith in that whatsoever. All right, and then the last one, and then we'll get out of here. We're getting to that time. What do you guys think about the odds of Bitcoin going back up past 60K in the next, let's just say the next year, and this time? So Ben, you're up there in the upper left. Take this one real quick, and I'll get to James.
That's a good question. Above 60K. I mean, look, I think we're at a really critical point right now. Like, I think it'd be a lot easier to answer this question in like a month, to see like what happens here with the stock market, and do we put in a lower low, or is it a higher low or a double bottom, for instance? Like it's hard to imagine if the NASDAQ goes into, say, some type of 6 to 12 month downtrend / consolidation phase, and I wouldn't be as optimistic. But if we just bounce here, let's imagine a scenario where the Ukraine-Russia stuff blows over, a scenario where people realize that the Fed is raising rates, but they're only going to be raising them by marginal amounts that should not really have an effect on inflation, to be completely honest, right? And what happens if we realize the Fed's doing something about inflation and it's no longer having an effect? Then, maybe Bitcoin's the answer again, So I would say, like, if probabilities, I don't know, maybe 50-50, but I think that in a month or two, we can probably have a little bit of clarity on that. And by the way, if we do go back down to lower valuations, below 30K, my speculation is that we probably wouldn't spend a ton of time there. Like, I don't think we would spend a ton of time there. So we could bounce off of it relatively quickly. That's what's happened in the past. Like, if you think back to March 2020, we bounced pretty quickly. Think back to December 2018, we went down to the 200-week, but then we went up 4x in about 5 months after that happened. So I do think, I do think we will get back to those levels at some point over the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, in the next 12 months, it's certainly a possibility, but I think we need to first see how the stock market's going to behave over the next couple of weeks.
Stock market and the inflow of money, which would lead me to James. James, what do you got for this one?
So all it takes is one or two big treasuries, one more sovereign, a Bitcoin ETF approval, any other kind of good news, a couple of big buyers, a couple of people hedging their portfolios, some money from the bond portfolio, some money from traditional physical gold into Bitcoin. Any of these things happen, 95% chance we are going back to an all-time high. That's just math. And if you look at what the whales are doing, the 1,000+ holders of Bitcoin, they're stacking like mad. And 40 to 60,000 Bitcoin are leaving the exchanges every single month. And that's accelerating.
I saw one of the whales, or he just sent 9,000 Bitcoin in his wallet today, or today or yesterday, I think. I don't know if you guys saw that buy. It was from like the
9,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And I was looking at the transactions, and the first transaction though was like 6,000 Bitcoin at 60K. So
but
yeah, we're in whale games right now, I think.
Yeah, but it's just like what James talked about. Like I'm sure James, I think we're all in the same boat here. We're probably just thinking, well, man, I kind of hope it does go down. Yeah, because if it goes down, then because we know where it's going to go. And then if James's models are correct, 750,000 at the most conservative level by 2030, I'm okay with that. I don't know if you're okay with that watching the video, but I'm okay with a measly 750K for one whole Bitcoin. That's just me.
And that's worst case scenario, everybody. That's like super bear. So, I mean, just again, take into account the sheer scantiness of supply. It doesn't take a lot to move this thing. And the supply is fixed. And that's why it is the most beautiful time in the world to be alive. Just imagine a central bank somewhere on earth buying Bitcoin. Imagine any one of the Fortune 100 companies buying Bitcoin. Imagine a huge global pension fund somewhere around the world buying Bitcoin. Imagine people converting 30 trillion of bonds, just a piece of it, 1%, 2% into Bitcoin. That's it. Game over.
Yeah.
Price goes up. And it's what's so programmed. It's the surest thing I've ever seen in my life. So.
And James is like 32 years old, so take it for him.
just got out of kindergarten.
Yeah, remember when Tesla came in and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna start buying Bitcoin." Look what the market did; it just exploded. That was just one company. I mean, granted, a large company, but just one.
$1.5 billion doubled the price.
One thing to remind people too is that if we had been doing this show back in March of 2020. We would have been you're stressing out about whether you buy at 5,000, at 6,000, at 4,000. At the end of the day, does it really matter a few years later, right? Does it really matter if you got it at 6K or at 5K or at 4K? It doesn't. By the way, $3,800 Bitcoin was basically almost 2 years ago now. So we're fast forward 24 months. The price is 10x, and we're all freaking out again. So. With that in mind, when we talk about these lower prices and could it happen? Could it not happen? I don't know. I don't care if it happens or not. The point is it doesn't really matter in the long term, right? It doesn't really matter as long as you have the right perspective. It should not have you losing any sleep at night.
Exactly. I call that time series investing, everybody. Snag a little bit, grab what you can. And as long as you got a 3, 5, 8-year horizon, you're going to do very well. It's programmed to go up. Again, unless something terrible, cataclysmic happens, which is highly unlikely, but
asteroids are zombies are coming.
That's the math. Okay, there's a 20% chance we go to 30,000, and there's an 80% chance we go to 100,000 the next year or so. That's the math. The downside is 10 grand. The upside is a lot more, 6x. So.
I'll take it over Netflix stock. Okay. So on that note, I think that was a great way just to leave it off a little bit of not crazy hopium, but hope.
One final question. What do you guys see as the weekend action? Up or down? So we're at 40,000 now. Come on. Are we going to get back up to that second step of 42,000?
So I will just tell you this, I hope, and I know people want us to go up. I don't want it to go up. I don't want it to go up. I don't want it to go up right now. I've got some, mean, I bought this damn house. Now I'm a little bit dry and powder, but I'm waiting for it to go back down a little more because I have a little bit. So I'm hoping that it doesn't go up. I don't see it going up because everybody's freaked out about this Ukraine situation, which I think is just Putin flexing. I could be wrong, but whatever. So that's what I
don't know, man. Hearing you say that, now I need to go place some market buys, I think.
See, that's it.
The big Rob money's coming in now.
I'll say the same thing. I mean, I'll say, well, I won't say the same thing as that, but I'll say the same thing that I said a few weeks ago, right? Like going into the weekend, I'll be optimistic, because if you're optimistic and you're wrong, people are more forgiving than if you're pessimistic and wrong. So I will say that, you know, after such a sharp sell-off, I mean, look, the one thing we have going for us is that the NASDAQ only closed down 1%, right? It wasn't 3%.
Exactly.
So like,
There's only
silver
one
lining here, right?
All we need is
maybe we'll get a bounce back up. And yeah, I don't know. It'll be kind of funny if we just bounce back to 50K next week or something, and then like we're all talking about.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I'll lean towards the bull side just because I prefer to be optimistic.
That's cool. James, what do you think is going to go down? You think it's going to go up this weekend?
This is, again, I've been talking about this for 3 weeks now. There's too many dark clouds hanging out there, you know, between the Fed, interest rates, Ukraine. But I think everybody's getting jaded from the Ukraine story now. It's like, okay, nothing's going to happen. All we need, though, is one satellite image of tanks withdrawing from the border, and then boom, gangbusters next week.
Hold on, before I forget, has anybody heard anything about that Fed emergency meeting? I didn't follow it at all. I just didn't care. But
yeah, they said they're probably going to raise in March. So some people were expecting they would raise immediately, but they decided not to do that.
Well, but and I think the market's only pricing in a 0.25% raise for March.
50 basis points.
Is it 50?
Yeah.
But I thought the markets were pricing it in at 25 now.
No, at 50 basis points. What I heard last, which was yesterday, 50 basis points for March, and then 2 incremental 25 basis points raises through June. That's the plan. July timeframe. So, but even if they raise, 6%, it doesn't fix inflation, but it cripples the GDP growth and the employment numbers, and that's the problem. So they're on this tightrope. Right. So they can't jack rates too much, and it doesn't impact inflation anyway. Inflation is there.
I'll bet you a round of beers right now that they will not. They'll raise the first one, but when it comes to the second, that timeline, they'll push it back. They'll punt. That's my. Yep. That's just like that. Okay.
Yeah, they'll jack to show they have some whatever power, and then the next mini crisis, rates go back down again, and money printing continues. They're stuck. It's that simple. Anyway, guys. Thanks
it's been an hour. Thanks so much, everybody. Remember James and Ben's channel, link in the description, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Adios.
Good weekend, everybody.
Bye.